This is the last moment she was seen. She walked out of her apartment and vanished. Hours later, her car was found. But what the cameras captured next makes no sense. A man walking away. And somehow his face is never visible. Jennifer Kesse was 24 years old, and at that point in her life, things were finally starting to come together. She had just moved into her own apartment in Orlando, a place she worked for and earned on her own. From the outside, everything looked stable. A job, a routine, plans. And theta euros exactly why this case doesn't sit right. Because nothing about her life suggests she would suddenly disappear. That morning didn't begin with anything unusual, no reason to think this day would be any different from the ones before it. She got ready and left for work the same way she always did, moving through a routine that had never been a problem before. At some point, she stepped outside, locked the door behind her, and walked toward her car. That moment simple as it sounds is the last confirmed point where anyone can say where she was. After that, there is nothing. No confirmed sightings, no calls, no messages, no indication that anything went wrong. At first, it didn't immediately feel like a disappearance. It felt like a delay. People assume normal explanations first. Maybe she overslept. Maybe she changed plans. Maybe her phone died. But as time passed, those explanations started to fall apart. She didn't show up to work, and that wasn't something people could easily ignore, because Jennifer wasn't the type to break her routine without a reason. Calls weren't returned. No activity anywhere. It was as if her day had been interrupted and then erased. And then, something changed the direction of the entire case. Her car was found. Not hidden, not damaged just parked in a different apartment complex, close enough to raise questions, but far enough to matter. At first glance, nothing looked wrong. But when investigators took a closer look, small details began to stand out. The position of the seat didn't match her height. The way the car was parked felt slightly off. Individually, those things don't mean much. Together, they suggest something else. Because if Jennifer didn't park that car then someone else did. And that changes everything. It means whatever happened to her didn't end at her apartment. It continued, and someone had enough control of the situation to move her vehicle afterward. And here is where it stops feeling random. The car wasn't destroyed, and it wasn't hidden. It was left in a place where it could be found. So now the question isn't just what happened to her. Is why it happened this way. Because if this was random, it doesn't fully explain the control. And if it wasn't random then someone was paying attention. Close enough to understand her routine, her timing, her habits. Which means this didn't start that morning. It started before she ever walked out that door. Once the car was found, the entire case shifted in a different direction, because suddenly it wasn't just about where Jennifer was, but how that car ended up somewhere else. That detail matters more than it looks, because if she didn't park it, then someone else had to, and that means at some point another person was inside her car, making decisions after she was already gone. So investigators turned to surveillance cameras around the complex where the car was left, not expecting anything dramatic, just hoping to confirm timing. What they found ended up becoming the most frustrating part of the entire case. On the footage, you can see a person walking away from the area where Jennifer's car was parked, and nothing about that movement stands out at first. They not running, they not looking around, they not trying to hide. They just walk, calmly, like someone who isn't worried about being seen. And theta what makes it important. Because if this person is there at the exact moment the car was abandoned, then theta not random. Thea Euro Re connected to it, and most likely, Thea Euro Re the one who parked it. The problem is, the camera never gives you what you need. You can see the body clearly, the clothes, the movement, even the way the person walks, but every time the face should come into view, it gets blocked by the fence running across the frame. As they move past it, the vertical bars line up in a way that hides the face again and again, and when you go through the footage frame by frame, there isn't a single clear shot. Not one. And Theta Euro S where it stops making sense. Because the footage isn't a low quality, Eta Euro S not damaged, and Eta Euro S not too dark. It just never gives you that one moment where you can actually identify the person. So instead of having a suspect, investigators are left with a silhouette, someone they can describe but not name. They can estimate height, build, general appearance, but none of that is enough to move the case forward. And when you look at the way this person walks away from the car, it doesn't feel rushed or chaotic. It feels controlled. Which suggests that by the time the car was parked, whatever happened to Jennifer had already been decided. And that tightens the timeline more than people realize, because now you are not looking at something that played out slowly. You are looking at something that likely happened quickly, quietly, and without drawing attention. Which leads to the part that still doesn't have a clear answer. If something that serious happened in that window of time, how did no one see it, and how did it leave so little behind? At this point, the case splits into a few possible directions, and none of them fully explain everything. One of the first ideas people go to is that this was random. Wrong place, wrong time. She walks out, someone happens to be there, something escalates, and it ends quickly. It sounds simple, and in some cases, that does happen. But here is the problem. Random situations usually leave chaos behind. Noise. Witnesses. Something out of place that doesn't fit. In Jennifer Euro's case, you don't really see that. There are no clear sign of a struggle, no reports of anything unusual in that exact moment, and no one coming forward saying they saw something happen. That doesn't completely rule it out, but it makes it harder to believe it was purely chance. The second possibility is more controlled. That someone noticed her before that morning. Watched her routine. Learned her timing. Knew when she leaves, or she parks, how predictable her day is. And if Theta Euro is true, then what happened wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. Not in a complicated, movie-style way, but in a simple, practical sense. Be there at the right time. Catch her off guard. Get control of the situation before anyone even realizes something is wrong. That would explain the lack of noise, the clean break in the timeline, and the fact that the car ends up somewhere else without drawing attention. But even that leaves questions. Because planning usually comes with mistakes. Something overlooked. Something rushed. And here, there are very little to work with. Which brings up a third possibility that people don't always like to consider. That whatever happened didn't look like a threat at first. That the person who approached her didn't trigger alarm. Maybe it felt normal enough that she didn't react immediately. Because if there are no immediate resistance, everything becomes easier. No noise. No scene. Just a moment that passes without anyone noticing what it really is. And when you combine that with what we see on the footage, it starts to form a pattern. The person leaving the car doesn't behave like someone who just escaped something chaotic. They move like someone who already finished what they came to do. And that detail keeps coming back. Because it suggests control from start to finish. Not panic. Not improvisation. Control. And Theta Euro is what makes this case uncomfortable to look at. Because when things happen that quietly, it means they can happen without being seen. It means a normal morning can turn into something else without leaving a clear point where everything went wrong. And theta euro sy, even with footage, even with a timeline, even with a person connected to the car euro. The most important part is still missing. Not just who did it, but how they managed to do it without anyone noticing. And theta euro s the part that still does na euro t fit. At this point, the case has pieces, but none of them really connect the way you a euro d expect. You have a timeline, you have the car, you have someone on camera euro, and still, nothing actually explains what happened to her. And theta euro s where it starts to feel frustrating. Because usually, when you have this much, something moves forward. A mistake shows up. Someone sees something. A detail clicks into place. Here, that never really happens. The footage does na euro t identify the person. The car does na euro t tell you what happened inside it. And there a euro s no clear moment where everything goes wrong. So you a euro re left trying to read behavior instead of facts. And theta euro s always risky. Because you start asking a euro, what does this actually mean? The person on that footage does na euro t look stressed. They don't a euro t look like someone who just did something chaotic. They just walk away. And theta euro s the part that sticks. Because if there a euro s no urgency, then whatever happened probably didn't a euro t happen right there. It happened earlier. Somewhere between her door and that car. And theta euro s the part where there a euro s almost nothing. No clear witness. No obvious disturbance. Nothing that makes people stop and say something a euro s wrong. Which forces you to think about a different kind of situation. One where it didn't a euro t look like a threat at first. Because if it did, someone would have noticed. But if it didn't a euro ta euro, then it could pass without attention. And once that moment passes, everything after it becomes easier. No scene. No noise. No interruption. Just a gap. And everything we euro re-looking at now a euro comes after that gap. The car. The footage. The timeline. Theta euro re all after the important part already happened. And theta euro s why this case feels stuck. Because the part that matters most to euro is the part no one saw. What makes this case difficult is na euro t the lack of evidence, eta euro s the fact that nothing actually connects in a way that gives you a clear answer. You can follow the timeline, you can look at the car, you can even study the footage, and it still feels like you a euro re missing something obvious that should be there. And theta euro s what keeps pulling people back into it. Because it does na euro t feel unsolved in a normal way. It feels unfinished. When you think about it, the most important part of this entire case happens in a very small window of time, somewhere between her apartment door and the moment that car shows up in a different place. Everything we euro re-looking at comes after that. And theta euro s the problem. We euro re-analyzing the aftermath, not the event itself. So naturally, you start asking the same questions over and over again, trying to figure out where things stopped being normal. Was it quick, something that happened before anyone had time to react, or was it something that didn't a euro t look wrong at first, which would explain why no one noticed anything unusual? Because if it didn't a euro t look like a threat, then there a euro s no reason for anyone nearby to pay attention. And once that moment passes, everything else becomes easier to control. The car gets moved. The person walks away. The timeline continues, but without her in it. And theta euro s where it becomes uncomfortable. Not because of what we know, but because of how little it might have taken for everything to go unnoticed. You don't a euro t need chaos for something like this. You don't a euro t need noise. Sometimes all it takes is the right moment, and someone who understands it. Theta euro s why this case still feels close to being solved, even though it isn't a euro t. Because all the pieces are there, just not in a way that lets you put them together completely. And until that missing part is found, the story does na euro t really end. It just a euro stops.